Welcome to the Million Dollar Nonprofit Podcast. I'm Tom Kelly, your nonprofit catalyst. As the founder of Charity Auctions Today and Donor Books, I've spent almost 2 decades helping organizations like yours break through fundraising barriers, engage communities on a deeper level, and accelerate meaningful growth. In this podcast, along with my incredible guests, we'll uncover transformational ideas, tackle challenges head-on, and share insider strategies that you won't find anywhere else. Each episode is designed to take your nonprofit to the $1 million mark and beyond, because impact doesn't scale by chance, it scales by choice. So let's get started. In today's episode, we're diving deep into the powerful world of email fundraising with Christy Scott, an expert in donor communication and email marketing strategies. We explore why email is far from dead and remains one of the most effective ways to engage donors, especially when it's done right. Christy breaks down the importance of a well-crafted donor welcome sequence and how those first few emails after a donation are key to building lasting relationships with your supporters. We also discuss why even small nonprofits should send frequent, purposeful emails and how to repurpose content to make the process easier without losing efficiency. By the end, we'll tackle a critical question: how do you measure the success of your welcome sequence and how you can make sure it leads to stronger donor loyalty and future giving? You'll walk away with actionable insights and the tools to take your nonprofit's email strategy to the next level. Christy, welcome to the Million Dollar Nonprofit Podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tom, for having me. I am so excited to be here.
Well, this is great because I love email fundraising, email marketing, and I think this is one of the topics that most nonprofits overlook because they think email is dead. Yeah. So why don't we go right into that question? So anybody that pushes you back and says, I get too many emails, nobody wants my email, what would you say to that?
Oh, I love this. So this is why I specialize in email. I have a background of doing everything in nonprofit, and I was heavily involved in our marketing and volunteer management at my last in-house job. But email is the key to connecting with folks who really want to be engaged with your mission. And so the reason we might think it's dead is we get a lot of spammy emails in our inbox, but ultimately folks who are committed to your mission and are interested in supporting what you do, it's not going to be too many emails. And I also, a big thing that I recommend to folks, because for some of your supporters, maybe you are going to send too many emails, but there are ways to ask them, is this too much for them as an individual, and have them set their preferences so that they're not getting inundated with those emails if that's a concern you have. But ultimately, I err on the side of send a lot of emails. And if folks unsubscribe, that means they weren't necessarily going to be your people to begin with. And the donors who really care about your mission will stay subscribed. If it's a specific campaign, then there's ways of just including that preference and opt-out option if you are concerned about that with folks who maybe don't want as many emails, but you still want them to be engaged with your regular emails.
Yeah, and I know we're going to go through some email sequences and templates and things like that. And I want everybody to stay to the end because Christy is giving away her templates for free for everybody that's listening today. So make sure what you're about to learn here is going to be fire, and she's going to give you the secret sauce at the end. So please stay tuned for that. Yeah. But let's dive into the donor welcome sequence. Mm-hmm. And what is your thought approach to how critical the donor email welcome sequence is for email fundraising?
Okay. So when folks subscribe to when they first donate, they're the most engaged in what you're doing and they're paying the most attention they may ever pay, to be honest. And so you want to instantly bring them into what your organization is all about, because often, depending on where they came from. They may know just like the basics of your organization. They may know about one specific program they heard about, but they may not know your full vision and mission as an organization. And an email welcome sequence is key for like taking them through the steps of, this is what our organization does. Here's a success story about someone we served or a huge goal that we accomplished. Things like that. You can bring in the story of your nonprofit immediately when they're paying the most attention. And beyond bringing them in immediately and getting them caught up to what your mission is, it also helps with keeping them on the list because they know, oh, this is what's going on in this organization. These are the types of emails I'm going to be receiving. And so it's just so important. Like if someone is giving to your organization, they want to know what you're doing, and being able to give that information to them in a very digestible way. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can use information you already have on your website in that email sequence, and make it more digestible for them as someone who's newer to your organization or is a brand new donor. Maybe they were already on your list, but you want them to get more engaged because they've finally given a gift, right?
Well, and I'm thinking back as you're saying that to all the nonprofits that I've donated, through from maybe like a friend or a family member is like, hey, I'm supporting this organization. Can you help contribute because they're trying to raise money for X, Y, or Z,
Yes.
And we would. And I don't think I've ever gotten anything but a thank you landing page.
Yes.
Thank you for your donation. We'll never hear from you again, type of thing. And, hearing you say like kind of, I still don't know what any of those in the last year I think there's 3 of them that we donated to. I don't know what they do, but somebody says, hey, can you help support my friend? They have this organization and I donate to them, but I don't know what they do. I just did it for a friend. And it would have been wonderful if they would have dropped us into an email sequence of just, like you said, digestible emails periodically that just like, hey, this is what we do. This is our mission. This is who we help.
Yes.
And out of all the people that you've worked with, obviously this is what you implement, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you come into an organization, but how many have some type of a email welcome sequence in play like this, or is it kind of unheard of?
So I have not done like a full study of my clients or folks that I've done workshops with, but they are in the minority, folks who already have it set up. There are folks I've worked with who have a welcome sequence set up and they're good to go. And then we work on other specific email campaign things that they need. But that's usually one of the first things I implement because so few nonprofits, even those who do very good fundraising email campaigns, some of them still don't have their new donor welcome sequence set up. And that's like, it's so disappointing for me when they don't have it set up because of that very reason. Like even you sharing your experience, I've been that donor as well, where I've given to an organization when I've been at an event or a peer-to-peer fundraising campaign, and I never hear from the organization again other than a nice little thank you email. Like, and if I'm lucky, sometimes those thank you emails aren't very interesting either. So update your donor thank you email while you're at it.
Exactly. It's like, here's just a thank you again. It's just the same thing as the landing page, but just in
Yeah, it's
email
too
form.
generic. Like share, give them resources, reuse what you have. Like I think a lot of times we're so scattered in our industry, and folks who are in-house, I've been there where it's like, I have so much going on. Oh, wait, I have to come up with a story. And it's like, if you already have something that you've used, see how you can reuse it. Like get permission if there's someone who's offered their story and check in with them and make sure it's okay. But beyond making sure that you have the permission of that person to share their story, like you can reuse a lot of different information for your sequences.
And what do you think are like the key components to a successful donor sequence?
Mm-hmm. So number one is planning. And I know for small nonprofits, planning can be tough because we're planning so much. But I think just taking the time, getting a buy-in from other departments as well, like your direct service staff, running it by them. Hey, we're going to be sharing this with our donors. What do you think? Do you have any like advice for folks? Like advice for folks we could talk to who had a success story that you've worked with, things like that. So I think that's number one, is planning well. And then the other aspect is making sure you actually just do it, like try it. I think often we can get caught up in perfectionism, especially with our marketing in nonprofits. And so just making something as simple as possible that is the most realistic for your workload, get that done, and then go ahead and send it. But also don't just like set it and forget it, right? Because just like anything in fundraising, we want to be aware of how folks are reacting to the sequence. And so if you notice that folks are not clicking through links that you share, or they're not responding if you ask for like a reply, or like, why did you donate, that kind of question, then you need to rethink how, like, reevaluate your sequence, right? So do that later. First, get it up, write it, keep it simple. Folks should not be hearing every single thing about your organization. And I know we do this a lot where we just like want to update them on everything. And especially in a welcome sequence, you don't want to overwhelm them because they will unsubscribe immediately. And some folks are going to unsubscribe anyway, but those are folks who just weren't interested in engaging further, and, bless and release, and it's all good.
And part of the welcome sequence, how many emails should be in that sequence, you think?
Yeah,
or what's the perfect amount?
So, I mean, I'm going to say what probably a lot of consultants say, it depends, but my minimum is 3 emails. And actually the resource I'm going to share is a 3-part one, but other organizations I've worked with, we've done longer than 3. I think 3 is the bare minimum. I think the template that I'm sharing, I had someone go in and they created multiple emails, like they kind of split up the template to create a 5-part series. And so whatever works for you to share your mission, I would say don't do more than 7. But it kind of depends just on how your donor base interacts with your emails.
And in this welcome sequence, are you asking for a donation every time, or are you really just providing information on what the organization does and kind of there to tell the story?
Great question. So it should not be an explicit ask campaign because they've just given to you. I'm a fundraiser, so there should always be a donate button somewhere at the bottom if folks want to be giving again. And we're not really going to cover this in this issue, or in this podcast, but it's really important to have a plan for monthly giving for new donors. And so that's a whole thing. We're not going to have a ton of time for that, but that's a whole thing you need to make sure you're doing as well, because you want to bring in anyone who's a first-time donor into your monthly program. And Dana Snyder is someone who has a really good, a lot of great resources on monthly donor programs. And so what you want it to do is share your mission, your vision as an organization, your values as an organization. So like make sure they're in the right spot, right? Because some folks are not going to be super committed to your organization for whatever reason. So you want that up front. And then you want to share a story about your organization, or several stories if it's appropriate, because those stories will help solidify like why you do your mission, why you're about those values, and how successful you've been already with the funds that you've received. So demonstrating that essentially that value that you're bringing to the community. And then having something that invites them into an aspect of your organization beyond donating, like a peer-to-peer campaign or an event, volunteering if you have a strong volunteer program, things like that. Like even something as simple as like, hey, share that you donated on your LinkedIn or whatever social media platform you use. That is the main thing, to just further engage with them a lot. And, most folks are not going to be actually like doing everything you ask, but the folks who do really want to get involved will be responsive to that, and they will sign up for a volunteer opportunity. They will go to that event that you have coming up. And so that's the approach, is more just bringing them in other ways, and then always just having like the soft donate button somewhere in those emails I recommend, because you never know. But having a plan for how you want to engage them as a monthly donor, that's more of a separate conversation, but it connects, right? Because you want to promote your monthly program somehow. But that's usually best to do on your landing page for the donation, to say, do you want this to be a monthly donation?
Nice. And when do you think is the right time to kind of refresh or update existing donors that have already maybe gone through that welcome sequence?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So it depends on the organization, of course. It all always depends, but I would recommend at least quarterly, looking at fitting that within your overall fundraising plan, of course. Like, okay, so someone who's been a new donor, they've seen the welcome sequence, they were engaged in it, or this group of new donors from this campaign was very engaged. How can we re-engage them with new information? I mean, a part of that is you want to have a consistent, like just update list, whether that's monthly or weekly. I recommend weekly, but I understand some folks don't have capacity for more than a monthly update email. And that's fine to start with. Just try to get up to like bi-weekly or weekly, ideally someday. So having folks be engaged with your email list beyond the new donor welcome sequence is really key. Because ultimately you just want them to keep paying attention to your mission. And of course, if they become a monthly donor, then they should be in another segment of your list to engage them in a different way.
That's a great segue into my next question, which is, how can a nonprofit repurpose or adapt that welcome sequence for existing donors, and then, tailor it to different segments of their audience?
Yeah.
So now that you've segmented your list, how can you start to kind of tailor those messages differently?
I love that. So I think if someone is an existing donor and they've never received any kind of like welcome introduction to your organization, depending on their history, and do this as a group, don't go like one by one for donors, especially small amounts that are given, but looking at them as a group, this specific campaign or this specific event that they gave to, how can we almost like reintroduce them to the organization, I think is a smart way to think about it. You want them to you can just have the language of, hey, we really appreciate your gift. Maybe depending on your email tool, like see if you can throw in like, thank you so much for when you gave in such and such time period. We really appreciate it. We haven't heard from you in a while, or we haven't talked to you in a while. We'd love to share a few more updates about what our organization does, and you can use it in that way. There's also a way you could just use the welcome template as like a reintroduction overall for a segment of your list, and just have it be that like monthly or weekly email. You can take that template and then plug it in and send it to that segment of donors, have them kind of get a different email that's tweaked more towards reintroducing them to the organization rather than your regular updated email. Right. So, I mean, I'm such a nerd about email. I could go on, but that's what I recommend in the time that we have.
Yeah. What mistakes should organizations avoid when creating or sending like their first donor welcome sequence?
Mm-hmm. Oh, the number one mistake I see with small nonprofits is not testing that your personalization worked. So, like, a very simple example of that is like the first name piece. Like, we all, if we've been inside of a MailChimp or MailerLite, whatever tool you use, you've used the tag for like first name, and making sure that everyone on your list like actually has their first name on there. If you could double check that, because I've seen where folks, their subscription form doesn't have, like, doesn't even ask for a first name, it's just an email, and then they send out an email, and then I get like an email that has like dear first name or hi first name, not Christy. I mean, haven't we all gotten that email? So,
Yep.
and that's because especially small nonprofits, like, you're not email experts. Like, I'm not trying to shame anyone who has made that mistake. I am trying to just remind you, like, there are things that need to be checked and double checked. And I know when we're a small team, especially, it's hard, but please just take time to test, send out a test email to yourself. And that's a big one. And then I think not another big mistake is not making sure you like trying to reinvent the wheel. I see as like a big mistake with sending out emails, is that, oh, it has to be like the shiny new thing, and not looking at the resources you already have. And that's a big part of preventing burnout, right? Like, we're seeing a lot of that. And what's it, y'all just had an episode about burnout, I think. And so making sure you reuse what you have. And remember, like, even if folks remember, oh, I think they sent out something similar like this, it's okay. Like, your donor base, they love your work. If they're still on your list, they're not going to hold it against you. And if they do hold it against you, I'm kind of like, okay, bye. Like, maybe they're not a good fit as a donor if they're that picky. Like, oh, they sent something repetitive to us. 10 to 1, they're not going to remember every detail of each email. So repurpose, reuse, and even reminding them of a really wonderful story is great. Like, we don't want to be too repetitive with success stories, but there are ways to just like make your life a little easier with email.
Yeah, and like don't reinvent the wheel, don't overcomplicate things, just, simple, little, messages, blurbs,
And that's what performs
success
really
story.
well, right? And those of you who get the template that I'm going to share, you'll see, like, and that's my bias also. I'm very like text first in my emails. I think there's a time and a place for well-designed emails, or like heavily like graphics and images. But the vast majority of y'all listening are small nonprofits. So keeping it simple is not only going to help your donors read through what you're sharing, it's also going to help you not stress as much, because it's simpler for you to put together an email that only has a few images rather than trying to get super fancy with it.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. How do you send out this great email sequence? Now, how do you measure the success of it?
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the things that, you're not, the main goal isn't to really get more
Yep.
donations because they just donated. It's really to just engage with them, tell them about your message and trying to keep them engaged and wanting more, wanting to hear more from your organization. So how do you really track the success of it?
Yeah. So always open rates and click-through rates are the main measures for success. I mean, with any email that you're sending out, but especially with welcome sequences. And that can help you even look at what kind of language you want to use moving forward with them, depending on how much they interact with your campaign. Think replies are something I use a lot. It helps a lot with deliverability. If you know anything about email marketing, you've probably heard that there's some changes that have happened where if you're not careful on the technical side, your emails can end up in spam a lot of the time. So asking for a reply in that initial welcome sequence will help with them getting emails in the first place. And y'all will see in the templates that I share, I also have something that requests that folks kind of like approve of your email address so that they are essentially like not going to spam on Google or not going to your promotions tab. That's what it is. And that I got that actually from another email consultant that I linked in that. Tarzan K is their name. So a big part of the welcome sequence piece too is once you have another campaign later, look at how folks have received the welcome sequence, and when they came on, see how that measures up overall with like their them staying on as a monthly donor, for example, right? Like the long-term implications of the welcome sequence. And I think you'll see another good measure is unsubscribe rates, right? That's tricky because I'm always a fan of saying like our unsubscribe rate is not like, it's not bad for folks to unsubscribe, but you do want to be aware that if you're getting like a huge spike in folks unsubscribing, then maybe you want to look at changing your strategy, whether that's like when you send it or what you're writing.
Yeah, I think that's all great information. And I know we can go on for hours on this topic, but I want to really get into the listeners' hands, your templates and your playbooks and your free giveaway.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about that. Like what, what is it that you're giving away to everybody that's listening today?
Yeah, so I have a 3-part welcome sequence template to get you started. If you don't have a welcome sequence, I highly recommend you grab this. It is essentially a thank you gift for joining my email list, where you can get a ton of other email fundraising advice, tips. I share resources of other email consultants, other nonprofit consultants. I share articles about our sector, about equity, and just like having a more ethical nonprofit as well. So please, if you found any value in what I'm saying, get the template, join my email list. You may unsubscribe anytime. I will not take offense if you just grab the template and move along with your life. That's fine. It really is just a way for you to engage more with me if what I share is valuable for you. And then you'll get occasional like offers for other free webinars that I do and other freebies. I mean, I kind of have a little like toolbox of freebies, so you'll always be the first to know if you join my list. The link, just so I say it verbally, but I believe we'll have it linked in your show notes, is kscott, kscott.link/new donor. So that's the new donor welcome sequence. I think something to like we talked a lot about like repurposing that sequence. So think about ways that you can use that sequence for folks, even who join your subscriber, like they subscribe to your newsletter randomly. Maybe there's a way to repurpose it for that as well. But this is especially perfect for those new donors. And decide how many emails you want. It's 3 is my minimum, but if you want to add more, go for it.
Well, that's great. And everybody loves freebies.
I do.
And so I always love to wrap up the show by giving my top 5 takeaways from today's episode. Perfect. So here's going to be my recap of what we learned today on email, fundraising sequences, welcome sequences. So number 1 tip, frequent emails are okay. So donors invested in your mission, especially the first time donors, won't mind receiving more emails. Yes. So that was a great tip that you said. I think the second tip that you landed was keep it simple. Yes. Reuse and recycle existing content. Your donor welcome sequence doesn't need to be perfect or to be efficient or to be effective. I'm sorry. The third tip I got out of this was minimum of 3 emails, no more than 7, but try to keep it around 3. Include at least 3 emails in your welcome sequence with a donate button somewhere, but focus on the stories, the value, and the success, not on the donations. They had already made the donation. The purpose is to engage and get them to learn about the story of the mission, why it's there, and who you help. The fourth tip, welcome existing donors too. So reword and repurpose for new donors, emails to reintroduce, re-engage existing donors, just kind of repurpose it for even the donors that might have not received a welcome, email sequence from the beginning. It doesn't have to be the exact same wording, but you can change the wording to match old donors. And then my fifth and final tip that I got out of here is the whole email sequence is just a different conversation. A welcome email sequence is a different conversation than like the monthly giving strategy. Now, the monthly giving strategy is important, but the main reason for a welcome sequence is to really just get them to learn about the mission, the organization, the volunteers, who you help, so that they turn into monthly donors. You can't expect them to turn into a monthly donor if they don't even know who you are yet. So I think that was just some amazing tips that you shared today. I know we can go on for hours, but I want everybody to go download the email templates that Christy's offering. It's going to be great. Get into her world, get onto her newsletter, start learning more about the importance of email fundraising. And Christy Scott, thank you so much for being on the $1 Million Nonprofit Podcast today.
Me, Tom. Such a pleasure. I had such a great time.
You got it. Take care.
Thank you for tuning in to the $1 Million Nonprofit Podcast. If you'd like free resources to take your nonprofit to the $1 million mark, visit realtomkelly.com/playbooks. And because I'm committed to helping nonprofits maximize their impact and reach as many people as possible, contact us at hello@realtomkelly.com to explore bringing me in to speak at your next event. And as always, I'm looking forward to sharing more transformative insights with you on our next episode.